Hails and welcome to Rauta. I am Jerry, and this time I'm gonna do a little bit of boring but hopeful, useful video about the Norwegian black metal from the 90s series that I've been doing for more than the past year. Now, through the whole the series of the one that I did, the original point was to give you a little bit of an idea how the Norwegian black metal scene from the 90s and even some 80s was in terms of bands coming from the bigger ones to the very small ones, that is demo level bands. Obviously, I started with the big names, the real known names like, Dark Throne, Mayhem, etc. Band towards the series went onward and all that's towards the end we go. I started going from the bigger one to the smaller because everybody knows the big ones. And how about the mid-size? Many do, many don't. And when it comes to the smaller ones, obviously there's a lot to learn, like in terms of music and all that stuff. Now during the series, which covered more than 20 episodes and more than 70 bands, there were quite a few albums and even bands which I heard for the first time. Most, however, were something that I already heard late 90s or early 2000s. There were lots of bands which I remember being bored with in the beginning. Some were now better maybe than before. Some were more boring than back in the days. And I'm not gonna name any single bands or single out any of the stuff because it is what it is, and each episode kind of already goes through what I was thinking about these bands. So why there's even a need for such a recap or finale of the whole series? First of all, there are way more bands that I got to cover throughout the whole idea. There was no original amount of bands I would go through, but of course it was to make the point more than say top 20 bigger bands. Everybody knows those. The purpose was to kind of educate you about the given bands which you might not know, especially if you're younger generation, less educated about Norwegian black metal. But also for me, give a kind of a reason to go through some of the bands which I haven't been listening for a long time. Say bands like Gehenna, quite known, but not in fact in top 20 or maybe even 30 when it comes to size, popularity, success, what have you. It was kind of like nice and refreshing to listen to some of those bands just because, maybe I would find some gems for myself. Maybe there are some hidden ones I should have known back in the days, and hey man, now I finally found them, maybe 30 years too late, but still nonetheless. It is also kind of a good reason to celebrate the Norwegian black metal scene because a lot of those bands are now 30 or older. There are bands which are like 40. Mayhem. I mean, we're living in 2024 now, and Mayhem pretty much started 4 years ago, which they're celebrating at Beyond the Gates Festival and all. But like I said, lots of those bands are now around 30, especially those bands that were founded like 1994. So there you have it. They're like nice round numbers. But like I said, there's a multiple of different reasons to do these kind of videos, and I saw a lot of you guys liked it, but it was kind of a given. Only the first episodes got like more numbers because obviously people will go for, friendly names that they already know. So me going through those discographies kind of made very little sense in the sense of like, hey, let's tell you something different, because they were not ranking videos, weren't even retrospective videos fully, even though a little bit of that time and theme. But kind of give you idea what's going on, like what separates bands like Mayhem from Immortal, what separates Emperor from, say, Gehenna, what is different between Limbonic Art and Iliar, the kind of stuff. I mean, Norwegian black metal scene from the 90s, very, very big, diverse, lots of variation between bands. Even sometimes same band can do totally different. Give Dark Throne for an example, or version for that matter. Now, but like I said, obviously the bigger bands got more attention, which is kind of how it goes. People can say, I only listen to, underground scene, I don't listen to the big bands. And numbers tell the otherwise. It's clearly that when we're talking about bands like Mayhem, Version, Dark Throne, Emperor, whatever, the numbers are this high. When we're stuck in talk about the less known bands, the interest goes like this. So what happened, like the first episode, which covered bigger bands, obviously there's also this value of being something new. Like, what is this series? Some people went for that and like, oh, this is something old shit, I'm not gonna watch the series. So there's that also. But also, like I said, bigger bands are here, mid-size here, and we're talking about demo bands. Maybe 10% which started with the early episodes are gonna watch episode 23 or so. But also the point is, after I'm done with more than 20 episodes of these bands and more than 70 bands with full discography rounds, it's kind of a taxing, gets even a little bit boring eventually because you kind of start listening to those albums as part of work, really. And also when I later on decided, which I figured later on, which I wasn't thinking too much about ahead when I was planning this whole series, because there was no clear idea like let's do 10 episodes and 30 bands or whatever. Of course, when I went to Metal Archives and decided to do a little bit of searching, how many actually bands there were about black metal scene in the 90s, like, actually making the search terms like 1990s band about black metal and coming from Norway. Guess what? The amount is almost 300. Now, that of course includes bands that are beyond black metal, like black death metal bands. And really, I could totally like just focus on the bands that were more about black metal and all. But the thing is, when you start listening to certain bands, obviously, if you don't know true their whole discography, you don't know what there is to be expect. So if I just like decide to not cover a band which is dead black, I might miss something important. And then again, I also covered already some bands which were not pure black metal. For instance, the last episode before this one had bands that were actually black trash. Au Noir, Nocturnal Breed, and even the horrible Desecrator. And especially bands like Au Noir would be really unfair, kind of like missing the point of the whole series if I were not to cover that one. Even if they're kind of a trashy bands compared to a lot of other bands. But then again, if we really go for that far, like defining genre and choosing which bands to include, I could really, question my choice to include bands like Covenant or Ulver for that matter. I mean, it's mostly known for non-black metallic outcome, or Burzum for that matter. Half the albums are more like synth music. So the point here is, if I would select chosen bands based if they're pure blood black metal or something else, combination, hybrid, or changing styles later on, that would be kind of a hypocritical. Also, the other purpose of this video is, of course, to kind of give me a break, a kind of an excuse. Like I said, there were almost 300 bands which have something to do with black metal and coming from 1990s Norway, and I covered about 70. So I would still go like, if I were to go 200 more bands, this series will take years and years. Obviously not all the discographies are big. Some have like 1-2 albums. It's pretty quick to go through, but also that time is then, taken off from something else. Some other discography runs, some other crash course video types, which people have been hoping for. So I think now it's the perfect time to kind of call it quits, at least for the time being. Now that I have covered almost 75 bands, it's kind of okay to say it's beyond just crash course. It's like someone said, it's actually a university course, going through so many bands and literally hundreds of albums. And maybe, which I've been already thinking, there could be more crash courses like Finnish black metal or Greek black metal or Swedish black metal, and you could go along with a lot of lists like that. So it's time to do something else, but I am not going to say it's finished for real. Maybe I will actually come back to this Norwegian name and just make the list in such a way that I already skip the ones that I've done and continue with more names. I don't know. What do you think? Should I do more Norwegian coverage later on, or should we just call it a day and consider it all done and focus other countries? It's up to you two people, because I like when you give me recommendations, ideas, suggestions and all that stuff. Of course, in the end, I make the call. I decide what to listen, what to not do, what kind of videos I want to do. But I also really, really value our communication. You as audience saying what kind of topics you would like to be addressed, what kind of topics you would like to see covered here on Rauta, and what kind of topics you find utterly uninteresting. So please give me feedback about the whole Crash Course series. What could be better? Should there be more bands per episode? Should be there more quickly overall recap? Should we go more into details? Do you want anecdotes? Whatever. I might not know them, but I'm just keen to hear what you have in your mind. But like I said, if you want to know something basic about Norwegian black metal, I think this whole series gives you a little bit of insight. What kind of bands there are to be found, what kind of music they did, and what happened during their careers, at least the very basics. Of course, you can always dig deeper with, search engines and sites like Metal Archives, going through zine interviews and all. There are lots to be found, and this was by no means supposed to be some cover it all, be it all end all kind of a series or documentary. I don't do documentaries. I don't have the money or funding for that. Just giving you a little bit of idea what there is to be found And I think the next stop will be Greek black metal. It's a little bit smaller than, say, Norwegian or Finnish or Swedish black metal scene, but nonetheless very exciting and not as known as its Swedish and Norwegian counterparts. So I think there could be a lot of interesting bands to be talked about, some interesting bands to be found and discussed. So maybe we will go there, but first I will take a vacation, a few weeks out of the whole thing in June, and come summer later I will be listening to some of interesting bands and also more of those retrospective videos which I did for bands like Archcoat and Amon Amarth, among others previously. So these might have a little bit overlapping to do, but let's see where it leads us and where it takes us. And now off you go. If you haven't started the series yet, there's no better time than start doing it now. And if you enjoyed it fully or partially or whatever, it's just single episodes here and there, like I said, looking forward to your comments and all. Now, off you go. Enjoy some metal. Enjoy some good cold drinks. It's going to be hot outside. So, Rauta, out.